Hi everyone, welcome to today's Lunch and Learn. I am super excited about today's topic and guest. Although you don't need that much of an intro, Lisa, do you want to tell everybody who you are?
Well, first of all, thank you, Suki, for inviting me into this. I was
You're
quite
welcome.
surprised that you thought this might be an interesting topic because it was something that, I sort of thought long and hard about over my career. So, again, my name is Lisa Thompson. I have been in the staffing, this wonderful industry we call crazy staffing, for 30 plus years. And again, thank you so much for everyone that registered and everyone that came in. I was quite surprised to see that there's a representation of people that are early career, back when I was first in the industry, to my mid career, until later in life now, which is what sort of prompted this topic, with people, everyone from people I've reported to, um, people who have reported to me, and all my wonderful coworkers. So Suki, if you just kind of want to take it away here and we
Okay,
can kind of
yeah.
get this started. And
Yeah, I'm really excited about today's topic because often we hear, especially when you kind of like start hitting your 40s, oh, don't rock the boat, don't change jobs, all that stuff. And here we are talking about making a career change. Now, I remember, I remember headhunting you way back when, what, 13, 14,
Mhm,
something like that, years ago, and you were
mhm,
done with the industry. You were ready
mhm,
to leave. You had your shoes on, you'd kind of packed your bags. And I remember
mhm,
talking to you, and I remember saying, just explore this one company, meet this one individual. And you
mhm.
kind of like reluctantly, begrudgingly kind of thought, okay, but Suki, I am going to leave. And here we are,
Mhm,
right? So, do you want to tell people a little bit about where you were at that stage and why
mhm,
you were ready to leave the industry?
mhm. Well, I had actually sort of semi left the industry and went to work for a nonprofit, which was interesting for me because it was placing people with disabilities and working with companies to work with people with disabilities. But I had pretty much said I'm done with the general staffing. I was tired. I was tired of the grind. But for those of you that know Suki, she was quite convincing, and she says you just have to meet this individual, see what you think, and just take a leap of faith. Just trust me on this. So that's what I did. And um, as a number of you that know me know, that I met Mark, who had taken over Canada, Mark Hootsie, who was running Drake at the time. And when I met him, he reignited my passion for the industry and reignited my thoughts about redoing things. So at that time, I was hitting close to the big 5-0. And again, people are like, why don't you just stay where it's comfortable, where you're doing these things? But again, there was something about it that just made me say, let's give this another go. So that's
Yeah,
kind of what
because
happened.
it is. It's having when you have passion for what you're doing and an
Hmm.
industry, there's kind of like no stopping you, right? So,
Hmm.
13 years you worked with Drake International. You've
Hmm.
worked with some amazing people throughout those
Hmm.
13 years. Some have moved on to much bigger roles internationally, left the company, and so forth. But what prompted you to make this recent move?
Well, as we all know, the famous COVID word really
Yep.
got people thinking about a lot of different things. And, I never thought I was going to be a work from home person. I never thought I would sit behind, a keyboard in my house. Just as much as I love the phones, and you all know I'm a phone fan, um, it just got me thinking about a number of different things. And I had sat in on a session where you had, I think at that time, it was 5 leaders from different companies. And something inside of me just said, there might be something else out there for you. And that's when I sort of started exploring it. And it was tough because, I mean, when you have as many great years as a company that I had, um, it was a bit scary, but there was just something inside of me that said, what, you know, what's making you want to change? So what I had to do was I really had to take a good hard look and understand what wanted to make me change. And there was a variety of reasons, and anyone's going to have their own reasons for doing that. And then I thought, is there something I could bring to the table with a whole new audience, a whole new group of people, a whole new group of coworkers? Is there something else I can get? And if I do make a change, can I make a difference somewhere? So those were the things that sort of happened, and that's what you and I got talking about. And it was a year in the making, my move.
Yeah.
And
So
the first time I actually met with a deco, that wasn't the opportunity that was going to be right, that made me really think that's what I want to do. And I had
that's
sort of
right.
handpicked a deco and a couple of other organizations, but the first opportunity that was presented, there was something inside of me saying, this isn't the move to make this late in your career.
So the panel you're talking about, if I remember correctly, was the leadership panel
Hmm.
back July, August, something like that, 2021.
It was the
Can
first
you,
leadership panel you had.
yeah, can you remember what, I'm just interested. Um, what was it? Was it the fact that they were the way they were talking about the industry,
Hmm.
COVID and some of the things they were
Hmm.
doing?
Hmm.
What was it? I mean, you may not be able to pinpoint it and remember, but I'm just curious,
Hmm.
what was it that those leaders said?
There was just their excitement for the industry, their
Hmm.
excitement for a couple of things they said where their companies were going, how they handled the transition through COVID. And again, there was two particular companies that stood out, Adecco being one of them. And I remember having a conversation saying, this can't be the real deal. Is this a dog and pony show to get people thinking about doing things? And you said no, it was the real deal. And I thought, maybe some of my cultural beliefs, and again, I wasn't unhappy. I was fine, and I was doing things, but there was just something that sparked that there might be something for me to do a little bit later moving on. Now, the interesting part about that is people did say to me when I spoke to some of my mentors, and I had this conversation with you as well, and when I talk to friends and everything, everyone's like, Lisa, you are way too old to make a career change. Why would you roll the dice? And why would you do it at this point in time where you're happy where you are? And the people that you report to are happy with you. Why would you risk it all at your age?
I
Which was a little
remember
bit
you
upsetting.
telling
I
me that.
sometimes think that. Yeah.
Yeah, I remember
Yeah.
you telling me everybody was saying that to you. But here's the thing, right? Age, I know some 25, 30, 35-year-olds in our industry that don't have less than 50% of your passion and what you've got to offer. Because there seems to be this misconception that the older you get, the less risk you should be taking, less desirable you are to a potential new
Hmm.
employer. And friends and family, God love them, they're trying to keep you safe.
Hmm.
But despite all of that, you still made the move. You still
Hmm.
put yourself out there. Now, I'm sure that wasn't without, for lack of a better word, nerves and a little bit of
Hmm.
fear. Can you talk a little bit about that? Because I promise you, there are many, many people who are watching this live, who will watch the replays, who'll be able to
Hmm.
resonate. And they're in that position where they are, for lack of a better word, later stage in their career, in a
Hmm.
company they hate, in a role they hate. Maybe they're bored. Maybe they're just thinking they've got so much more to offer. Because if you can
Hmm.
just talk a little bit about what were some of those thoughts going through your head? You've got all these voices coming in, but what was
Hmm.
Lisa thinking?
Um, I was thinking, and normally I'm fairly brave, and I jump in with both feet, and I can be fairly spontaneous, which can be really good, and it can also work against you. So I thought, am I just being spontaneous? Am I just being crazy? Are the people right? about you being, less valuable as you're older. I mean, we always hear about things, people are getting old. I don't want to turn 50. I don't want to turn 60. I don't want to. And a girlfriend of mine said to me, she says, I would have, my parents were both gone by the time they were in their 45s. That's young. How
That's very
wonderful would it be to have them around as older and people that can give you information. And again, one of the things I encourage in this too is for recruiters sitting here that have clients that are saying, oh well, we don't want to look at someone at that age. Well, why wouldn't you? They bring so much life experience, they bring intrinsic knowledge. I mean, the one thing about this industry that I know, as much as it changes, it still stays the same. And so just the different things that people can bring. And so for me, was I a little bit scared? Of course I was scared. It's a big change, especially because you're comfortable where you are, and you like what you're doing. I mean, my coworkers, and I know some of them are on this session, are people that I've stayed in touch with, and to this day I will, they'll always be my, as I call them, my, work family. But it was somebody that actually I worked with that had that moved on to a different organization, and you'll know who I'm talking about. It's a fellow that was the branch manager and moved on, and I just said, I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to do it. And he said, you need to do this. So it was someone younger who I'd
yeah.
worked with on a couple of occasions that said to me, you need to go. It's time for you. And the fact that you're even entertaining it, you give your stuff to a whole bunch of new people. And so that's sort of was one of the final things, with outside of meeting, of course, Janelle and Elaine, who I was just like, how can I not work for these ladies?
I think you hit on a couple of really important points here. First one being message to fellow recruiters.
Hmm.
Everybody assumes the younger you are, the more energy you have. The older you are, the less energy you have, less open to change,
Hmm.
and that type of stuff. And that simply isn't true. I'm 54 years old,
Hmm.
and I've probably got more energy now than I had 10 years ago. We make, as recruiters, clients make these assumptions and, for lack of a better word, demands on us. So
Hmm.
I think we have a duty to be pushing back on clients and saying, but why? Because when you lose companies that are losing individuals like yourself, or they're making them redundant because they want the younger workforce and that type of
Hmm.
thing, what they don't understand is all that experience has walked. Yes, you can go and get an MBA, you can get top grades at Harvard, all the rest of it.
Hmm.
That's book smart. That does not replace the life experience, being, especially in our industry, because we're dealing with people, does not replace the situational learning and experience and expertise. Um, and a lot of people don't actually, either don't understand. I'm not sure whether it's they don't understand it or they don't care that they're allowing all that knowledge to walk, all that experience to walk, and especially after 13, 14 odd years, the relationships to walk as well. What are some of the things you think we can do as recruiters when we're advising our clients, when the clients are making these demands? What are some of the things we can say or do to really help, for lack of a better word, the more experienced older candidates still be able to make amazing career moves?
Well, and it's interesting. When I first got into the industry, when I was, my son was just, I think he was 2.5 years old, and I was looking at, I had been an administrator, a secretary, as they called them back then, a number of years, and people were, it, we did those personality profiles, and they said you need to get into something that's more sales driven. I think, but at that time there was a group called Opportunity 45, which 45 was considered getting older people into the workforce. Then it became 50. Then it became 55. And now it's people in the 60s. Recruiters, you can't let your clients automatically assume just because someone is in their late 50s, early 60s, that you're only going to get a couple years out of them. You might not. But you also can't be guaranteed that if someone is 30 years old, that you're going to get 10 or 12 years out of them. That's not necessarily the case. So I think more and more people are looking at that. And I think more people are considering that. But I think you're doing a disservice to your clients if you only present young, fresh out of school blood versus people that are further along in their careers and
What
defining what it is.
what about when, and I'm now thinking proactively headhunting and
Mhm,
things like that, because I want to talk about unconscious bias, because
mhm,
we, I say the collective royal we, right? We
mhm,
look at someone's profile, someone's CV, we say,
mhm,
oh, Lisa's been there 15, whatever, however many years. She ain't going to want to make a move, right?
mhm,
And in your case, you weren't actively looking per se. You were
mhm,
quietly, passively, but you weren't putting yourself out there
mhm,
the same way. So if somebody else had been looking at your profile, we make this assumption, oh, she's been there for a long time. She isn't going to be
mhm,
interested.
mhm,
Oh, yeah, look, her work career goes back to however many decades it
mhm,
goes back to. Oh, she's going to be older. So I think
mhm,
we as recruiters, we do have, or not just agency recruiters, I'm talking HR, anybody involved in the hiring
mhm,
process, we have this unconscious bias.
mhm,
What are some of the things you suggest that these individuals do to
mhm,
consciously help the more experienced, mature workforce, A, get back into the workforce,
mhm.
but also make the moves that they want to make?
So I'm going to preach an old thing from one of my many mentors, and I've been blessed to have a lot of them. We need to pick up the phone, and we need to find a way of reaching out to them and talking to them to find out, because you can find out hidden things when you have those phone calls. And that can and I'm not even talking about people that are making moves that are in sales roles or making moves that are in other roles, or even looking at a resume of candidates in light industrial. You have no idea how many, and again, people aren't supposed to say this, but we all know people do say things like that, where I've presented candidates to clients for more physical type work that will say, oh, well, they're in their 50s. They won't be able to do that. And it's just going to be an injury. And this is going to happen, or that is going to happen. Or again, without even really talking or meeting with those people. And we know what happens, and we know that those conversations are not supposed to be happening, but those conversations do. And again, I mean, I look back and I think of my dad, who, when he was in his um, 50s and 60s, was out skating and out racketing sports of kids that were half his age, that were younger than we were. So again, we make the assumptions that older means you're not physically fit in some occasions. It means that you're tired and you're not going to want to work the extra hours. It means a lot of different things. But again, um, I don't, and again, I don't encourage people working massive amounts of overtime and doing it over and over and over again. But there's flexibility that you have when you're in an older age demographic. But again, I've had, since I switched, I don't know, probably 10 or 15 emails now, emails on LinkedIn saying, "Are you ready to make a switch?"
Wow.
And I'm like, well, I don't know what's prompting this, since I just made a switch. I don't know if they're just not reading it, or it's been flagged some way. But again, not one person has picked up a phone and called, or not one person has sent a, a, a an email that's made me want to even answer them back, other than, sorry, I'm not interested. I mean, the fact that I'm not interested in making another move is a big point to it. But um, very boring asks, nothing exciting, nothing that made me think, wow, they want to get to know me. So the candidates, I think that if you're looking at older candidates that maybe those passive seekers, you got to get them excited about doing it. And when somebody of an older age range that's currently working or not working sends you a thing, take the time because you don't know how excited they can be about anything. That would be my advice. I'm a big, as you know, a big pick up the phone and talk to people.
100%. It's You're so right. We had a real difficult well, it wasn't difficult. It was difficult until it started.
Hmm.
But we had a particular client, one of their team lead managers, make a request in the
Hmm.
hiring process, and we were like, absolutely no way, no way. So we had that tough job of
Hmm.
approaching the client and saying,
Hmm.
sorry, Mr. Client, we are not going to discriminate here, so
Hmm.
therefore we can't work with you. And so you build up all these stories in your mind of how difficult that conversation is going to be. And we actually jumped on, I think there's four of us on the call, and the client, the top bosses were mortified
Hmm.
when we gave them the feedback.
Hmm.
So much so that they immediately took action. Sometimes, I guess the point I'm making here is sometimes people don't realize what they're saying
Hmm.
is actually discriminative, and they're just thinking, okay, I'm using your example of lifting things, light industrial,
Hmm.
right? Don't want an
Hmm.
older person because they can't lift.
Hmm.
Well, that's still discriminating,
Hmm.
right? So we had that what we thought was going to be a really tough conversation because nobody likes to have
Hmm.
these kind of conversations. But you know
No.
what? It turned out extremely well. They took it away and put some internal training and things in place for that
Hmm.
particular hiring manager, who also then reached out to us and said, thank you for pointing this out. She genuinely hadn't realized exactly what she
Hmm.
had said, right? So I think our job,
Hmm.
the collective we, is call it out when we see it,
Hmm.
because sometimes people are not aware. Like, people just make these assumptions, they don't actually realize it's discriminating. And age discrimination is very real.
Well, and even questions sometimes. I mean, you have me prompt to think. You need to really uncover what the reason for the ask is. So I
Yep.
remember years ago when I was first in the industry, I presented a candidate to do some admin work to a client, and he had a question. He said, the skills look really great and all of that, but do they have children? And I was like, you can't ask me that question. I was like, back then I was a lot more bold and a lot more direct about certain things. And he's like, well, but I need to know. And I said, well, that's unfortunately something I can't discuss. Why do you need to know that? And he goes, well, we're having a children's Christmas party and we would want to have gifts for her family.
Wow.
He didn't care whether or not she had children. I just assumed that. And that was me assuming things. So again, we have to make sure again that we are not assuming they're asking the questions to necessarily be discriminatory, or they might not even know it's not appropriate. But again, it's interesting is like you've got to really dig deep to find out what it is. And if it's somebody that truly doesn't want to hire someone that's my age, well then maybe they're not your customer.
Yeah. Because the
Maybe
reality
and
is
and
there are.
I certainly wouldn't go. And if you would have to talk a deco into hiring me, even though I was of an older demographic, I wouldn't have wanted to go there. But that was never a topic of conversation. That was
No.
never anything. The minute I met Janelle and Eileen in that meeting, I was like, dang straight, I've got to go work for these ladies. I mean, I want to work for these leaders. I want to see these people. And so when the time came when people were like, why? I said I couldn't not do it.
Yeah.
After I knew what was going on, I knew I had to do it. And not only did I make a change later in life, I went into a different, as you know, different vertical and a different type of role. And I was like, holy Hannah, like this is very, very different, right? I'm not going out to run around the warehouses and sell forklift operators now, or not sell forklift operators, but promote the light industrial staffing and the distribution. I made a switch and went into oil and gas, which is something I hadn't done. in 25 years.
That
So it
brings me
was
on to,
two big changes.
yeah, that brings me on to, you made the change. You and I have known each other a really long time.
Hmm.
Um, that CEO panel happening, funny enough, two of your bosses were now on that.
Yeah.
Janelle and Mark are both on that. Um, and then I remember, as you said, we had the conversation around Christmas. You interviewed, it wasn't the right role for you.
Hmm.
And then they came back for you when there was the right role, which is amazing. What about those individuals that are listening to you right now and they'd like to make a move?
Hmm.
They feel they have more to offer, but
Hmm.
they're frightened to make that move. What's some of the advice you would give them?
You've got to do what's right for your for the other thing that was very profound in me making a change was, most importantly, is this right for my family and for
Hmm.
myself? Because it's not just me that gets impacted. So you have to look at that and say, what is the best move for you overall personally? And again, fear, I'm not sure who's, there's nothing to fear but fear itself. It's not so scary once you have somebody that really can back you, and you have to know, like, what are the reasons why. And again, are you exploring those opportunities within your own company? Is it a right cultural fit within your own company? Is there an opportunity out there? You can't be afraid to go and ask for what you want. And then if someone reaches out and gives you the gift of giving it to you, which fortunately I got, take it, run with it, and just learn about the new people. I mean, one of the things, I was welcomed with very open arms from an amazing group of recruiters and account managers and leaders, throughout the company. And people walked me through things. And let me tell you, I called you and I said, this learning curve, holy man, learning new systems, learning new processes, learning new clients, going from being, and the other thing I would advise is you have to learn to check your ego, because it's meaning, and I mean with this, with all respect, I was respected at Drake when people heard I was leaving. People were calling and saying, we're going to miss you, we're going to do that. You go from knowing everyone and lots of things and really enjoying the people you worked with to no one knows you now. Like, people don't, and I mean, it's, no one says, oh, call Lisa Thompson, she'll know this at Echo. I've gone from being somebody that was the go-to person to somebody now that I'm learning new things and earning my respect and those types of things. So that was an ego check after the first month. I was like, holy man, there's lots of fish in this big pond, and I'm not the whale. And I mean, and I don't mean that to sound bold, and I probably, it sounds a bit sassy, and I certainly don't mean it to be that way, but that was a huge change for me.
That's a really brilliant point you've touched on there, because you're right. You had an amazing career, very well respected. God, no, I've lost count of how many presidents' clubs and awards and things like that you went. You left all of that behind and you went into this unknown where, to your point, you had to learn oil, oil and gas. Um, you had to learn new systems, new people, new way of working, even a new culture,
Hmm.
right? You had to make all of those changes. So I think that's a fantastic bit of advice there. Check your ego, because if you're not open to learning a new way, then
Hmm.
that might not be the right move for you. Then looking for a bigger or different opportunity within your current employer may actually be the better move for you.
Yeah, and I would encourage that as well. And once you make the decision, don't look back. Keep looking forward and keep taking the baby steps forward, and don't let it scare you, because you and I had a conversation. I mean, I loved it, but I said it's a bit scary. Like, I'm trying to figure all these things out, and you're like, you'll get there. You can't let yourself be afraid.
Yep.
A little bit of fear is good, but you can't say, "Oh my goodness, I've made a big mistake. I need to like throw in the towel and do all of this." It's and at the point of when you decide, encounters come in, or people try and talk you out of it, or um, things like that. You have to just stand your ground and know it's going to be okay. It's going to be good. Just jump off the.
So you
You know
gotta
what? If you jump off the cliff, the parachute it'll click in.
well, not only that, you've got interview process, do your due diligence. And I say
Hmm.
that whether you're starting out at 19, 20, 21, or at 45, 50, 60. You got to do
Hmm.
your due diligence, right? Don't jump
Oh,
for the sake of
absolutely.
jumping. And you could equally, the chances of it not working and it being, it not working out is the same. Age doesn't come into it.
No,
If you've done your
it does
due
not.
diligence,
Hmm.
it simply doesn't. And we assume, we make that assumption that it does, right? And you're right, we are far more fearful of the what if. Now, you said something earlier, you were talking about the ego, checking that at the door, but you also talked about look for opportunities internally.
Hmm.
I just want to clarify something here. Often, and I speak to individuals who are at that later stage in their careers
Hmm.
who do want more, but they're also not getting it where they are because they're really good. I'm just going to use a salesperson as an example. Replace it with whatever you want to replace it with. They're really good. They've got this book of business. They've got X, client base and guaranteed revenue every year of X.
Hmm.
X.
Hmm.
Companies don't want to promote them even internally because it's just like, well, you know what, you've got that. You're really good in this role,
Hmm.
and then they overlook you, even despite you putting your hand up. So I think one of the things
Hmm.
I would say, I'm not sure, I think you'll agree, if you're in that situation and you're not getting that promotion for reasons like that, it's time to consider leaving
Hmm.
because
I would.
your career is not going to grow in that kind of
Yeah.
environment.
Yeah. And you have to decide whether you're looking for like a move up or a move laterally. You might want something less. Not everyone wants to be a manager, and not
Yep.
everyone wants to be um, necessarily leading people. My my first love, as you know, is being with the customers and selling. I'll I'll help lead, but my favorite role is not managing a team. I would much rather mentor people. So when you're looking, you have to really know what it is that you want to do. And it's often said sometimes companies are quick to promote the top salespeople, and
Yep.
then they don't give them any management training, and then we know what happens there. It all goes sideways and things go crazy. But if a company's truly not giving what you want at any age, I wouldn't say whether you're younger or older, you need to, if you're not getting it from your direct manager, and you've had a conversation then with their manager and they're not doing it, it's time to start exploring. It definitely is time to go.
Yeah. And I think right now everyone's talking about the R word, right? The way I look
We're
at
not
it, there's
allowed to
all
discuss that as far as I'm
yeah,
concerned. Yeah.
that's what R word, right?
Yeah.
Um, there's always something, right?
Hmm.
There's always something. And you know, it's always a good time and
Hmm.
it's always a bad time, right? There's things are
Hmm.
always going to be happening in your personal life,
Hmm.
in the economy, in whichever country you're in. And you gotta
Hmm.
just look at it and say, do you know what? I have to trust in myself
Hmm.
that I am making the right move. I've done my due diligence, and then just take that leap of faith. Now, I've got a
Hmm.
question for you. What
Hmm.
would you say to the 30-year-old Lisa about taking risks versus staying where you are?
Good question. Um, and I thought a bit about this. I would say to 30-year-old Lisa, take an opportunity in a different country.
Okay.
And the reason I would say that now is because, as you know, um, over the past number of years, I've had the opportunity to meet top performers from around the world. And how fun would it have been to learn and see and experience a new country? But I didn't do that. Well, I can't leave my family. I've got to, am I going to uproot my husband and son? Those kinds of things. I would say do that. I would say to 30-year-old Lisa, um, and this was one of my mentors at Drake, Curtis. Check your ego at the door. Make sure you're listening and hearing some other things so you don't miss out on things. And I would say, as much as you need to sometimes follow those KPIs and follow those things, there's a couple people that I let people talk me into cutting loose too soon, who've
Oh,
ended up
okay.
doing who have ended up doing very well in other places. I didn't go with my gut and I didn't fight enough for it. I would do that. So I would say go with your gut, do it humbly, because the more humble you get, the more you learn and the more people will listen and take to you. Move to another country and have fun mentoring people. I've, over the years, I found some people that didn't necessarily work directly, even in the same city I worked in and things like that. And embrace the people that you can mentor and focus on pushing them upwards and really guiding them along the way. And I've ended up with some amazing friends by doing that as well.
I love the international piece because I love international, right?
Hmm.
And I made that international move. I
Hmm.
uprooted the kids,
Hmm.
uprooted my whole family, and
Hmm.
I one of the things I do, to your point, is that whole international piece, because recruitment, the world's really big, but the world of recruiting is really small.
Hmm.
And I think it just gives you a completely different appreciation for other cultures, other
Hmm.
people, other ways of doing things. So that's a great one. Hey, but
Hmm.
never say never, right? Because that
Hmm.
opportunity may present itself. Would you consider it now if that opportunity, if Janelle Eileen came to you now and said, Lisa, we have this amazing opportunity in another country, would you consider it? And which country would it be?
Oh my goodness. Okay, what country would it be? I would consider it for a period of time. I mean,
Yep.
keeping in mind with aging parents
Yep.
and the dynamics now are different than when I would have left my parents when they were in their 60s versus 90s.
Yep.
Um, Maybe Australia. It would be somewhere warm.
Okay. Okay.
It's
So
not
you,
going to be. I'm not going to go to the Northern Arctic to open up a branch. And it would depend on the role. It would depend on other. I mean, I think it would be fun to do it versus because I know my son's settled. I know that, why not? I mean, why wouldn't we do something different? It's a great way to see the world as well.
yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
no, totally. Um, so let me ask you, I just want to do a time check. Okay, we're good for a few minutes. What would you do differently?
What would I do differently? Um, I would, I think I'd be a little bit braver in my asks.
Hmm.
Again, I was brought up with a father that was like, if you're not 15 minutes early, you're late. If your boss says, do this, do this, do this, do this, do this, you do it. Unless, of course, it was morally or ethically wrong, but
Yep.
don't challenge. I would challenge a little bit more. I would, in some cases, stand up for myself a little bit. I look back and when I wanted something one time and people told me absolutely not, that was not going to happen for me in my career. And it ended up happening by default. What would I do differently? It's a good question because I don't have a lot of regrets. I might pursue doing some more education
Hmm.
in conjunction with what I'm doing. I'd take time again. A lot of times, and again, I think it's part of the people in this industry. But there was times when I didn't take a much needed break.
Oh,
And
okay.
there's,
Yep.
yeah, there's a bit, and worrying about checking emails and worrying about checking this and checking that. But I do remember saying to somebody one time who was away on one of our adventures, they kept calling the branch and they kept checking the branch and they kept looking at things. And I said, "Why are you not enjoying yourself here?" "Well, what happens if this and this and this and this happens?" And I said, you've got to trust that your team is going to let this happen. So I would probably disconnect a little bit more. I mean, there's a big difference if your phone rings and you're having a coffee sitting
Yep.
at Wassa Lake on the beach and you know that there's some kind of a disaster going on that maybe they just need a little bit of help with, versus checking in every 15 minutes
Wow.
and
I mean,
and
that's
worrying
a
about.
sign.
Mhm,
That's just poor leadership. Would you not agree? When you feel the branch or team or business can't run
mhm.
without you, even for a day,
Well,
right?
yeah, and
That's
so again, check the ego at the door. You know
yeah,
what? Your branch is not going to collapse if you're gone for a day, a week, and it shouldn't collapse if you go after a year, if you've given your people the right tools, right? And you need
yeah,
to trust that. And how are other people supposed to learn if Lisa can't go away for a week and somebody else can talk to her clients? So again, I mean, I would do things differently, but we all make the mistakes.
yep.
We all make the things where you worry too much, and people also worry. Oh my God! Well, what happens if I go away and they talk to Suki and they like Suki better than they like me? Well, you know